The craft of being present. Welcome back. In this session, we're going to work on the work and second circle. The first thing we should all do every day is ask a very simple question. Where am I? I remember as a child reading the Bible, King James edition, being very worried about God in the Garden of Eden, saying to Adam, "Where are you?" Because I thought that was a very stupid question, because couldn't he see he was just hiding behind that tree? And then, of course, later in life you realise he was asking, where are you? Where are you in yourself? And when we talk about presence, we have 4 areas of presence that we really try to unite. Our physical presence, our emotional presence, our intellectual presence, and our spiritual presence. Where are we? They're not divided. Some days you stand and think, where am I in my body? Let's think about that. Where am I in my body today? Where am I in my breath system? Have I stopped breathing? Am I holding my breath? Where am I in my connection to the world? Am I looking out at the world? Am I intellectually present? Am I emotionally present? And maybe we can't get it all, and my work isn't about all of it. It starts with a very physical embodiment of presence. So we're going to start at the point we make contact with the earth, our feet. Where are my feet today? If you've got no shoes on and you can stand on your feet, the connection to the floor, the natural as opposed to the habitual, and that's a great part of my work, the natural position is just to be a bit further forward on the balls of our feet. A doctor once said to me, a foot doctor, he said, the critical thing is how you feel your big toe is touching the ground. And then where are our feet in terms of the rest of our body? Are they splayed out too far, away from our hips, or are they just under our hips, which is where they should be, to begin with? Or are they too close together? If they're too close together, we're pulling ourselves into first circle. If they're too wide, taking up too much space, we're going into third circle. Maybe we all have a space that we take up, and if we diminish ourselves through our feet, we're not opening ourselves to the space. If we're taking too much space, we're in third circle, and we're intruding on other people's energy. So the first thing to do in the morning maybe is to just look at your feet and think about your feet, and whether they're connected to the floor or whether you're back on your heels. And I want to reiterate a very important thing. These exercises are very simple. So simple that some people think they're too simple. But one of my mantras is, we have to do the simple before we do the profound. And if you do the work, which is the boring bit actually, the repetition, it's not difficult. So looking at your feet, are my toes crunched up? Do they need stretching? I had a student a while ago, and wonderful young man, and he was a refugee, and when I looked at his feet, they were completely crumpled up. And I looked at them, and he saw me looking at them. He said, I know, my feet are, and he said fucking. He said, my feet are a fucking mess. Because when I was young, my mother had no money, so I had either shoes that were too tight, and they squashed my feet, or they were too loose, and I had to grip to keep the shoes on. And I said, well, why don't you just get a tennis ball and just roll your feet over and begin to stretch them out, and then try the other one. And after you've done one foot, just put it back on the floor and you'll feel connection to the floor through the front of your foot, and then try the other one. And he said, okay. And off he went. And about 3 weeks later, I looked at his feet and I said, what have you been doing? He said, I've been doing what you told me to do. And suddenly his feet we're reconnected to the floor. And that might be a journey that we all have to take. And let's be very kind to each other. We might not get there. This idea of perfection doesn't exist, by the way. It doesn't exist. We're telling young people a very dirty lie that perfection exists. So we work to try and get somewhere. I once had a conversation with Nureyev, the dancer, and he talked about doing a perfect pirouette once, but he said it was in class and nobody saw it. So when you work on something, don't seek perfection, just do the work. Like this young man just did the work and his feet were rebalanced and he could feel the earth again. Every day, just move the ankle, move the foot, put it back on the floor, have it underneath the hips, and just see if it connects you a bit more into your presence. And then just come up a bit further. And as I said, when I first started teaching, I didn't see certain tensions, and I never saw locked knees until maybe 30 years ago. For whatever happened to our Western bodies, we started to lock our knees. Of course, you don't lock your knees if you're an elite athlete. You don't play tennis with your knees locked, you don't play football. And sometimes just reminding somebody who does a sport well that when they're playing tennis, they don't lock their knees re-release and find themselves. Because when we're centered in second circle, we have optimum energy and optimum strength and efficiency in our body. So the first thing you can do after your feet is just to think to yourself, just release my knees. Don't lock them back. Now, you don't have to over-bend them, but just be aware. And one of the quickest ways of finding that is to walk with purpose around a room. If you walk with purpose around a room and look out at the room, look out, don't look down at the floor, look out, look around you. See things differently. And when you stop, you might find that you're forward on your feet and your knees are unlocked. And then what happens is that we stop and then we brace ourselves, which is when we pull back our presence and pull back our body and pull back our breath system. So try walking with purpose, not a stroll, but walking with purpose around the space, and then stopping and feeling the connection through your feet and your knees. But start looking out. Look out across the space. Look out at a window and look at a tree. Look as you do it. Don't stay in your first circle box, and don't stay by pushing out and looking through things rather than at things. In the end, I will teach people how to speak to each other, not at each other. And the same applies when you do this very simple exercise of just walking around the space. And some people find that if they have a difficult conversation, in the same way, they walk around and they feel connected to the floor, and their presence and their voice and their power has more substance. Now, the next thing to think about are your hips. Are my hips pushed forward? Again, very interesting getting older, you know. Very interesting seeing things and patterns. The idea that a young person, somewhere around the 80s, started to push their hips forward. And if you push your hips forward, you lean back. And if you push your hips forward, your breath can't go down. So I'm going to teach some very simple tricks. So the pelvic area should be on top of the legs. On top of the legs. You're on your legs. It's a dancer's term. Now, it's sometimes useful, and some people hate this, is to look in a mirror. And if you look at yourself sideways on the mirror, can you see that your hips might be pushed forward? And again, pushing the hips forward, you will feel the tension in the back. A lot of backache is because we're pushing our hips forward. So this is the trick. Just swing your arms, have your feet underneath your hips, your knees unlocked, and just swing up and put your arms up into the air and see if you can feel the body begin to align. Then open your arms, Da Vinci I call it, and then as the arms drop, keep your spine up and see if your hips can be on top of your legs. So you're going up to the sky, the heavens, the gods, the goddesses. It occurred to me years ago that it's exactly what a child does. When we go up, you see Greek actors going up to the gods, opening their arms to the space above them. But that's exactly what we do as a child, going up to ask our parent to lift us. And maybe that is a natural thing that we do. But as you come down with your arms open, you might start to find that actually your body remembers something and you don't push the hips forward. And the same exercise helps you feel the spine is up. And it might be useful now just to sit, look around you, sit, but feel your feet on the floor, the energy forward, and your spine up. And if you just move around on the chair a bit, you might find that the pelvic area also settles. And in a moment when we do some simple breath exercises, the breath can go down to where it should go. It doesn't go down there, but the release goes down. The lungs are not down in your abdominal area, but that's where the release should go. But as you're sitting there, you'll also feel the spine comes up. Look at a 4-year-old sitting, watching television. The spine is perfect, and suddenly it collapses, as opposed to stay up. And sometimes instead of just being naturally up, we push ourselves up even further by lifting up the upper chest, which takes us into third circle. So again, as you stand, feet, checklist, knees, pelvic area, spine. Even if you get those things right, you will feel more connected in your body. Years ago, I was teaching in a top security prison, as I've done, and there was an idea and a research project that I talked about and was talked to me about, that actually they asked convicted muggers in New York to pick out people in street scenes of New York who they would mug and the people they wouldn't mug. I'm talking about professional muggers, not being off their head with crack cocaine, but people who went out to mug. And the correlation was 100%. They all chose the same people to mug, and they all chose the same people they wouldn't mug. And at first nobody could figure it out because it didn't seem to have anything to do with size or gender or age. It had to do with spine. I love the sayings in life that we have, that person's got spine or that person is spineless. This spine business is incredibly important, but it has to come from us being connected to the floor, not blocked off with our locked knees, not blocked off with a pelvic pushed forward. So the spine, now have a good old stretch of the spine. Feel the floor, go up through the body, just get the spine going, just move it around. Because the next area of tension that we have to look at is across the shoulders and the upper chest. Now, when I trained years ago, all we talked about was shoulder tension, and actually fear, anxiety, feeling unhappy with ourselves shows in the shoulders. People that are frightened, and my goodness, I put huge numbers of people on stage who are terrified. The first tension you see is generally a lifting of the shoulders, or a pulling round of the shoulders, or a pulling back of the shoulders. The shoulders should just hang there freely. But they can't hang freely if we're not connected to the floor. This connection idea is going to bore you in the end, but it's critical. Floor, knees, hips, spine, all of that becomes important. I found that out through my own teaching, because if you teach a release and the release doesn't work, it's a secondary tension. Most of our shoulder tension is secondary. We feel it very much when we get scared or we don't like somebody. Next time the person you can't bear walks into a room, just notice what happens to your shoulders. And then notice what happens to your breath, because we stop breathing. And of course, for a bully, for somebody who's a predator, us stopping breathing is one of the most gorgeous things that can happen for them. Because as soon as we stop breathing, we lose our power. So just move your shoulders around. Just move them around. Let that go. And by the way, if I can teach you to reset, you get a terrible meeting and your shoulders are up around your ears. Let it go. Reset. Reset all this tension. So one thing you can do is put one foot in front of the other and just very gently swing an arm round, one arm, and breathe. I'm going to come on to the breath in a moment. And breathe and just let the arm release and then let it just come back to where it wants to be. You might find out something wonderful. Your shoulder is released, but you'll feel more energy in your hand because shoulder tension cuts our arms off, cuts our hands off. Wrong tension debilitates and disempowers us. Try the other arm. Just let it swing round. Put one foot in front of the other and swing round and breathe. And gradually, the shoulders start to release. And if you find yourself standing, feet energy forward, knees unlocked, pelvic, spine up, the shoulders free, you start to feel more in your body, more in yourself. And that energy continually take out to the world in second circle. A lot of people exercise and they exercise just thinking about themselves, which you have to do, checking in on your tensions. But keep coming back to the world. Keep coming back to your presence and connection to the world. So now that the shoulders might be a bit freer, another lovely exercise is just to put your hands behind your back and just gently lift your arms up, holding your hands behind your back. And as you release again, just let the shoulders go where they want to go. The body knows. The body knows when it's centered. It gets very angry when we're not centered. We get diseased. The tension in our body is not a happy place for the body or the breath or for our presence. So we often find, I did it the other day actually, it's very funny, you sort of trip over in the street and you do one of those silly dances down the street in order to balance yourself. And as you do that, you have to let go of all the useless tension that will topple us over. And when I came back to my centre, I thought, oh, there I am again. Although the trip was not pleasant, it made me release tension that was gathering in my upper body. Feet, knees, pelvic, spine, shoulders. And then just very carefully, just feel, it sounds ridiculous, but your head should be on top of the spine. Not pulled down, not pushed forward, but looking out at the world. And if you put your hand gently on the front of your throat, when your head is up, you can feel that tension in the throat has been minimalized. Again, if you can bear to look into a mirror and just look at yourself and then go sideways and look and just see whether you might feel odd, but you might see that you're more aligned and centered. Most people today are pulling back. Most people pull back into first, and then if they have to go into third, they lift up into their chest. But just to be easy and connected and centered. And the simple little exercise is, if at that moment you have a little rock, you come back. You come back to your center. You're physically coming back to your center. If you put your favorite tension in, and by the way, in my teaching, I love doing things the wrong way because often you feel things more vividly. But if you put tension in your shoulders or your knees and you try and rock, you fall over. I remember thinking very early in my teaching career that most of our tensions are tensions of decadence. If I was a fisherman on a boat, and I've been working with a fisherman recently who's becoming an actor, And he confirmed that I'm right, that if you're not centered, if you're not in your body, you pull in a net and you drown. We are designed to be fully connected. And again, when we become too decadent, I was very honoured many years ago to work with a Hopi. And some of the elders of the Hopi were working with me, and one of them said, you see, we know that when life gets too easy, we have to move forward. We have to get out into nature. We have to go somewhere else. And it sounds a very dramatic thing to say, but sometimes we feel too safe. We feel too safe, and it's too easy just to fall into first circle. I once said to an actor who was standing in a production of King Lear, and he was standing holding his spear in a very cool way and looking very bored and probably worrying about what he was going to eat for supper. And I said to him, you're in the room with King Lear. And he looked at me and I said, can you just imagine? I wouldn't want to be in a room with Putin, and I would definitely not be in first circle, because this is dangerous. So this idea of survival in second circle in our bodies, but also an alertness, a being through the feet, the knees, the pelvic area, the spine, the shoulders, the head, and just the jaw. Again, how interesting to realize that jaw tension is the moment between flight and fight. It's a clenching, mostly found in urban, not country living, because it's completely unnatural to clench your teeth all the time. I had a top Olympian sent to me some years ago because the coach noticed that she tightened her jaw when she ran. And we just spent a bit of time releasing the jaw, and I think she took 0.4 off her running time over 100 meters, because every tension matters, and gradually you start to realize, when I asked you the question, where am I? You will realize where your tensions are. And as soon as you are aware, with a bit of work and a bit of consciousness, you can release that tension. You can release it. You can release the tension when the bully comes into the room, or when somebody comes in that you know is a threat to you. You can return to your natural physical presence. And another very quick trick, which will bring in the breath, because that's the next thing. I always say we're housed in our body, but we're powered through our breath. And that powers our voice, our mind, our heart, and our spirit. Without second circle breath, we can't do anything fully. But as you're now standing there, just walk to a wall, and I'm going to ask you to do a very simple exercise to get the breath going. And the natural breath in second circle is not up in the chest. You shouldn't see the chest lifting. The rib cage should open easily around the sides and the back of the rib cage. I'm going to talk about that a great deal in a moment. The back of the rib cage. Our lungs are at the back. They're not at the front. I learned all this from opera singers. I have enormous gratitude to so many people teaching me so much that I didn't learn at college. That the back of the rib cage. So the breath has to go down, the full breath. Opens the rib cage, the sides and the back, and then moves down right into the low abdominal area. So I'm going to ask you to do a very simple exercise. I cannot tell you how many actors terrified, first night actors terrified, I've got on with this exercise. It's a very simple thing to get your breath present. Go over to a wall and put one foot in front of the other. Remember not to lock your knees. Remember to have the energy forward on the front of your feet. Put your arms up. Look into the wall. Don't look down into the floor. Look into the wall. In fact, look just above eye line into the wall and gently push against the wall, not tightening your shoulders, not tightening the upper chest, having your arms bent. The beginning of a push starts with your arms bent, not finishes. People start pushing the wall with their arms straight out. There's no push, there's no energy in that. And just push against the wall and take as much time as you need to breathe. Take as much time. You can take the breath through the nose, the mouth, but give yourself the time to take breath. Most people today, all the rushing, all the multitasking, which doesn't work, by the way, women were supposed to be good at multitasking, but in fact, nobody is. We have to put out each moment, each task has to have our full presence. So just push against the wall and take as much time and try and breathe in silently. If I hear somebody gasp, the breath isn't free. You don't want the predator to hear you breathe, but take the breath in, and there's a wonderful moment when you might feel that it goes right down to the lower abdominal area. And then when you breathe out, just feel those muscles coming up into your body, sending the breath out, the column of air that in the end supports your presence physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. That is the column of air that supports our presence going out into all those areas. And as you breathe like that, you unite all those areas. We are all those things. We're physical, we're intellectual, we're emotional, and we're spiritual. We're all of it. And that happens when we fully take breath. The breath's inspiration. The Greeks knew with that word that as I take a breath in, I also get an idea. I get a feeling. And a lot of us don't breathe properly because we don't want to feel. Because we've been punished for feeling, or we've been feeling unsafe. So as you do this, it could get emotional, but it's a very simple thing. And after a few breaths, just come away and stand again centered and see if you feel a bit more energy in the breath. I got this exercise actually years ago because I'm a very odd thinker. I just saw a tabloid headline that said, 85-year-old woman lifts car off husband. And of course it might be untrue, but I thought, she could only do that by being present in her body and present on her breath, the connection to her breath. So go back to the wall, maybe. Try it a few times, get the breath down, come away, breathe across the space, breathe to a point, breathe outside to some landscape outside a window, and just allow yourself to take that time to breathe, the time to feel the breath settle as you breathe in and then you breathe out. That's all it is. It's very humbling. I talk about being humbled a lot because you realize in life that, I've realized that I teach things that people know. I'm not teaching anything that somebody doesn't know. All I teach really in the end is to breathe in fully and then to breathe out. It's that simple, that energy that simple. Now you could try this sitting by a desk, pushing with one hand, feet on the floor, feeling the breath go down. I had huge numbers of people during COVID come to me because they were losing their voice. A lot of barristers, a lot of judges, a lot of people who professionally normally are in an open court or a big space and they're breathing and suddenly they're losing their voice. And generally it was because they didn't have their feet on the floor and they didn't feel that they need to breathe. We need breath to use our voice, just like we need breath to think and feel. Everything is connected. So as you push it with one hand against a desk, you can do this mid-meeting. You can do this when you're disconnecting over a meal, that you feel that you're losing yourself. Of course, we have to switch off in order to switch on. And I mean that by switching off technology. Of course, we all know this, that this is what is now rapidly eroding our presence. But we then have to also, it's no good just putting the phone down in a meeting. We have to now reconnect. And this very simple thing is to reconnect to the breath. And just take that breath and look around. So this is so simple. A few moments a day thinking about it. And then think about it when you know you're losing it. When you're not connected to your presence through your body and breath. And try practicing it. Practice making that present eye contact, or even sometimes it's very hard to make eye contact, but you know some of the best conversations you have with your child is when you're driving, because hopefully you're present when you're driving. If you're not present, you shouldn't be driving. And they can feel your presence, and they're sitting beside you, and they can have very important conversations. Nobody is going to have an important conversation until they show up with their presence. And as a leader, which includes a parent, we have to show up with our presence. These very simple things. Am I present in my body? Where am I in my body? Can I shift that? Am I properly breathing? Am I taking the breath in and taking the breath out and just doing the simplest thing, which is to gather breath and give it out? Long before we worry about our voice or what we're going to say, just to show up in these ways. You get huge benefits, because when you're present with somebody, particularly somebody who isn't present, you humanize them. I talk to everyone, partly because I'm interested in everyone, but I notice that if somebody's driving me like a taxi driver and I speak to them and they become present, you can humanize them. They drive better. You're safer. At those parties, when people carry around champagne, maybe, if you're lucky, and some nice bits to eat, if you talk to that person, if you talk and make eye contact to them, you get more champagne because they come back. You know, there's a two-way street here. With children, with education, I don't know why every teacher should be taught how to be fully present with their class. Every leader should be. But we can start doing very simple things. Being aware of how our physical tensions cut off our presence. And being aware that our breath, when it's fully taken, not snatched, not tight, but fully into the back. And again, a very simple exercise under pressure. If you're sitting and your feet are on the floor, just putting your elbows on your knees and flopping over and feeling the back open. And if you take that further by just hugging yourself, you open the back. So simple things. We just started with very simple things. I've started a little campaign, on a pedestrian crossing, when somebody stops for you, make second circle contact, thank them. And you change your day and you change their day. We can start to rebuild our community, to give young people connection so they don't need to find it elsewhere. I was working with a group of top police women. And one of them said to me after the course, we need this in our community because the gangs thrive because no adult is fully present to these children. So again and again, these markers that I find, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to work with these people. But it's everywhere. It's in sport. You can be very good at a game, but you don't play it with full presence and full care. You can be a very good actor and you have craft, but you're not putting care into it, which is our presence. You could be a very good leader, but you don't take anyone along with you because you're not present with people. So we start with very simple things, and it's going to get more complex as we go along. But a few moments every day trying these things out. Trying often it out with people who don't know us. For some reason, some of our nearest and dearest are hardest. And just to finish this podcast, I can't tell